In the Australian outback, camels were introduced over 150 years ago. Now, as their population spirals increasingly out of control, the authorities are resorting to desperate measures. The cull offers scientists an opportunity to investigate this extraordinary desert survivor.
Look at that.
Here's the other one.
They're really, really springy.
Mark and Joy will uncover the anatomy that has allowed these animals to thrive in this hostile world.
Look at the inside of these cheeks. This is amazing.
Simon will see how his own body matches up to the camel's adaptations. And Richard Dawkins will explain how these giants have shaped our own history.
Whenever humans wanted to go into deserts, they took camels with them.
Come on, Mike. Settle down.
Join the team as they go deep inside the camel. In the driest, hottest, most lifeless places on Earth lives an extraordinary giant, the camel. It weighs over half a ton, fights its rivals to the death, and can go for over 6 months without a drop of water. Surprisingly, perhaps, the only place in the world where large numbers of camels roam wild is not the Sahara or the Gobi Desert.
Oh, wow, it's really close.
But here, in Australia.
There are thought to be around 1 million camels in Australia, and their numbers are doubling every 9 years. We're here to find out what it is about camels that makes them able to thrive in one of the harshest environments in the world.
Here he comes. Here he comes.
6 hours from Alice Springs, in the dead center of Australia, is Lambina Station, a farm over twice the size of Houston, Texas.
Whoa, well done.
Alan Fennell runs the station, and he's not happy with all the camels on his land.
So where are the camels?
Where I tell John.
Yeah, but I couldn't hear you, so where's that?
Ah, well, you weren't listening to your radio.
I was, but they were...
I can see we're going to have to give you Englishmen a sharpening up on getting organised, getting unlost, and bringing all your equipment and...
So how far away are they from here?
In your language, about 1.5 miles.
Okay. So the rest of it we go by road, yeah?
Yeah, well, you can walk if you want to, but cars are probably preferred.
You might wonder where all these camels came from in the first place. In fact, Australia is a land built on the backs of camels. In the 19th century, thousands were imported from South Asia and beyond to help tame this continent. Early settlers used them to carry heavy loads into the interior and to build the railways and roads that would eventually replace them. When they were no longer needed, their owners turned them loose into the desert rather than put them down. But instead of dying out, the camels thrived. Today, some camels are farmed for meat, others are tamed for racing, but this makes little impact on the rapidly growing population. There are now so many that they're destroying native species, so the government and farmers have been forced to cull them.
We're now pretty close. There's about 6 of them in a small group, about 1/4 mile ahead. So we're just easing our way up to them, because the last thing we want to do now is to spook them.
John Crombie is a marksman Alan's brought in to ensure each kill is clean. He has to shoot hundreds of camels a year.
It's kind of sad that these
These camels have done so well here in Australia. It's kind of Australia's built for them, that they have to cull them like this. The important thing is it's done really well.
Wow, he must have got it right, it went down right away.
Oh, it's gone down straight away. That was a great shot. That is the way to cull a wild animal. You got him just behind there, did you? Came through the back.
Check the brain box, mate. So touch his eye and see if he's alive.
Yeah, no, he's not.
No, he's down here. You just touch him like that, if he doesn't blink.
Yeah, no, he's gone.
You got full of all there?
Yeah. It's good shot. He's definitely gone.
That's his sweat glands.
Camels are an invasive introduced species in Australia. They don't belong in Australia. And when a species is introduced to virgin territory where there are no parasites that are used to it, where there are no predators that are used to it, the population can explode. It can run wildfire. This happened with rabbits in Australia, notoriously. When you do introduce species, you run the risk of driving indigenous animals extinct. This is an animal I've always had a special affection for. It's Thylacinus, the Tasmanian wolf. It looks like a dog. It's not a dog. It's a marsupial. It's a closer cousin to a kangaroo. It's extinct. It's gone. It's dead. Probably because of the introduction of the dingo, which outcompeted it. This is a species of small kangaroo, a wallaby. Again, this is all we've got of it now, these dried skins. Nobody knows quite why it went extinct, but it was almost certainly because of introduced animals. Very sad. So unfortunately, that's why camels in Australia have to be culled.
The death of this camel gives the team the chance to explore its anatomy. 84-year-old camel expert Jeff Mainfield will be their guide. He set up a camel research center for the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi and knows this animal inside out. Comparative anatomist Joy Reidenberg studies all types of animals, but she's never dissected a camel before.
Click, we're going to first notch.
And Mark Evans worked in Australia during his veterinary training and knows only too well how quickly the temperature will rise. They're going to have to work fast.
And I'll get that leg in.
That's very good.
Okay.
Excellent. Right. Right.
This is the traditional Arabic way of preparing a camel when you're going to eat it, is to do it with it in its kind of kneeling, resting position.
Yeah.
So,
That's it.
okay?
Yep. Yep.
All right, don't go 'em over. I'll tell you what's really interesting though, Jeff, is when you look underneath, you can actually see daylight
Yep.
through here. I mean, if I put my hand
Yes.
under there,
Yeah.
see that?
Yeah.
That's complete daylight.
That's right.
Which is amazing. So it's sitting on its sternum here, on that really calloused
Yep.
pad there.
It is called the pedestal.
Okay, pedestal, which is a perfect name for it. It just sits on its square. So that's propping up the whole of the chest end here off the ground. And the whole point of that is have as little as your body in contact with the baking hot earth as you possibly can and get some airflow.
In very hot weather, they're not silly. If there's shade, they'll seek it and lie down in it. If there is no shade, they'll lie down together, facing the sun to minimise the amount of body that the sunlight's falling on. And by being close together like that, with that sort of setup, you can get an air current underneath and convection currents will be formed to give them air circulation.
Wow, and you say they line up, they're like living sundials.
Yes.
That's
And
really cool, isn't it?
that's right. And the other...
Literally, that's really cool.
Yes,
that's the whole point.
That's
they
the
do.
point.
right.
Stay cool.
Camels have a reputation for being rather odd animals. It's been said that they were designed by a committee. I mean, this is very unfair. Camels are actually beautifully adapted to desert life. They also have a reputation for being contrary, bad-tempered animals. Kipling has a poem about all the various animals that served in the Indian Army, and the camel poem goes, "We haven't a camelty tune of our own to help us trollop along. But every neck is a hair trombone, rat-a-ta-ta, a hair trombone, and this is our marching song. Can't, don't, shan't, won't, pass it along the line. Somebody's pack has slipped from his back, wish it were only mine." And it goes on like that, giving the idea of the camel as being a difficult, contrary sort of animal.
Unusually for the outback, it's not that dry at the moment. In fact, they've just had the most rainfall since records began, but it's still incredibly hot.
Okay, Joy, have you got the knives over there so we can get Jeff starting to cut?
The team want to piece together how this animal survives the heat, and there's an obvious place to start.
The most iconic part of the animal is obviously the hump on the back.
Yeah.
This is a dromedary,
Yeah.
one
hump.
One hump. Do you know how I remember that between dromedary and Bactrian?
Good.
If you look at a camel and you stick your head on the side like that, if you see a shape D, it's a dromedary. If you see a shape B, 2 humps, it's a Bactrian.
That'll do.
That's all right, isn't it?
Yes.
I remember that from when I was about 7.
Good. The skin of the camel is about 1 centimetre thick. And when the hump is smaller, the skin is thicker because it has to be elastic to allow the hump to expand.
I mean, the hump is the most iconic part of the camel, and loads of myths surrounding what actually is in it.
I heard it had a big water jug in it.
That's right. That's what was originally thought, but that is absolutely myth.
Well, so far I'm seeing something that doesn't look very bloody at all. It's just mostly white.
That it's fatty tissue. A lot of cells in there that can be filled up with fat. And you see that just goes straight down onto the top of the vertebrae there.
Will the skin move down now a bit?
Yes.
Okay,
And
so
there's the extent of the hump.
the thought that's always struck me is that if you need fat, you need an energy source,
Yes.
so you need a fat source.
Yes.
You've got 2 options. One is you have it all over your body. But if you've got it all over your body, you're covered in a big insulating blubber layer, which actually from a heat point of view means you're going to be in a crisis. Or otherwise, you concentrate it in one place,
Yes.
and it's like a rucksack.
Yes.
It's
Actually,
a
it's
rucksack
like a big-
full of
Yes.
Mars bar, of food bars to be able to give you energy. When you want it, you use it. When you don't, you don't, and you stock it up when you can.
This fatty backpack removes fat from the rest of the camel's body, letting it lose heat more easily. As these thermal images show, the hump also acts as a shield. You can see how the hottest white areas are absorbing the heat, protecting the camel's vital organs from the overhead sun.
Thank you. So there it is, a fat store.
Yeah.
And there's some there's
Swing
quite
this up against it here like that, and you can see the hump shape to it.
there's quite some weight in that.
If we put it all together, it's roughly that shape.
That's big, and you're saying it could be something like out here.
At least 10 times that size.
At least 10 times. Wow, that's amazing.
This is pretty heavy already.
Yeah, it is.
You see very fat camels with such a huge hump, you get the impression that they're almost staggering under the load.
Really?
So if that's why the camel got its hump, where did these bizarre animals originally come from? It's not where you might think.
The camel family seems to have emerged in North America between 40 and 50 million years ago. And they all died out in North America, but not before they'd spread down across the Panama land bridge, which just formed about 3 million years ago, to South America, where they gave rise to several species, llama, vicuña, alpaca, and so on. And then spread to Asia, where they gave rise to 2 species of camel, the Bactrian camel, the dromedary. When they arrived in the Middle East and Africa, they came across another important species, man. And At that point, they were domesticated as beasts of burden, as meat animals, as milk animals.
These great beasts have shaped the story of humanity over 4,000 years. From the ancient kings of Babylon to Marco Polo, our history would have been totally different without them. There's something in wild camels' DNA that makes it possible to domesticate them. Simon Watt has gone to a ranch to find out how to tame a camel.
This is Glenda Sutton, record-breaking camel jockey. She's got 18 consecutive wins under her belt. Now, this is pretty incredible, but what I find all the more impressive is that all of Glenda's camels were once wild.
Okay, Simon, these are my domestic camels here. They're trained and they know what they're doing. These other two here are only a couple of months out of the wild. And the idea today is I really want to get them used to people around them, like yourself. They've never been touched by another human being before.
Just you?
Only me.
These guys are a lot bigger than you. It's hard to think of you being dominant and everything and
yes.
them following your lead. It's
the trust issue. That's what I'm trying to do with them. And I don't see them as a large animal. I see their mind all the time. Once you understand their mind, then you can get them to do anything for you.
It takes months and sometimes years to break in a wild camel to the point where it will accept a saddle and rider.
Be careful, mate, be careful. Come on, mate.
Bull camels can weigh up to 1,400 pounds and could crush Glenda to death or fracture her skull with a bite.
Not near the fence, come over.
But her main concern is the camel's safety.
They grow a very large fighting fang either side of the mouth, and it's like a dog's teeth. When they open their mouth, it's very threatening. But they know those teeth are there.
A camel has a vicious bite, as this man found out.
Also, when they're fighting as well, one will put the neck over this here, and they'll try and grab this front leg down here and pull them down onto the ground, and then they put the head of the other camel under the pedestal, and they'll try and crush the head of that camel.
Rivalry between camels can lead to deadly fights. This owner can do nothing to stop this male camel killing another. Even with a domesticated camel, you still need to be wary.
So when you first get a wild camel, you'd be right at the end of the broom like this. So he's going to sniff the broom. You'd show it to him, you'd start with the neck, and you have to remember that this front leg can come right out here. It can come out around here. This back leg here can shoot right out the back and come right out to about here. Like their whole hip will move out just so they can kick. See how that's cocked leg, that is ready to kick? That's a sign that he may kick because he's very sensitive under here.
Oh.
See that? He doesn't like that at all.
So all this is just building up to getting a saddle on this guy?
Yes.
Camels can lose their temper without warning. Simon's looking forward to getting to know Glenda's camels better.
Oh, he's a strong guy.
But now with a healthy dose of respect.
This guy has lost his...
By going inside this animal, the team is going to find out how it turns desert into hump. They'll start by opening up its mouth.
My God, look at the inside of these cheeks. This is amazing.
Yeah, well, they're papillae
that's incredible.
That are backward pointing.
Right.
And they help to retain the food once it gets into its mouth. It helps to retain the regurgitated stomach contents that comes up for further mastication.
So can we cut this open down the cheek so we can have a better look inside? Okay. Now this should be really interesting. Wow, look at that.
Now,
those are awesome. They're like hundreds of fingers.
Yes.
Using these papillae, the camel holds each mouthful in place, chewing it around 50 times. But as well as chewing, camels spend up to 12 hours a day searching for the next mouthful.
It's hard to appreciate what extraordinary feeders camels are. Their long neck means they can reach up to trees, and of course they can reach down to graze and grass. More than this, their cleft lip, their top lip, acts as fingers, allowing them to select the most succulent and youngest leaves. To give us a better idea, we're trying something that's never been done before. We stuck a camera up on top of his nose. This gives us a camel's eye view of feeding.
Watch as it chooses the best bits. This is fine when there's lots of food, but what's remarkable about the camel is that it can eat over 80% of the plants in the outback, plants that are indigestible to other animals. When drought hits, the camel can eat this tougher food, while cows and sheep starve.
So all these back here.
Veteran camel vet Jeff has uncovered something truly unusual.
Look at
Wait a
this.
minute, just hang on a minute.
What's that?
This is an extension of the soft palate,
That is
which
weird.
is inflatable.
Whoa!
And when the male is in rut and he wants to show off, he blows this up and it's like a big red balloon sticking out the left-hand side of his mouth.
That's so weird.
Where's the
Comes
opening
off,
to that?
comes off the soft palate.
That is amazing.
This inflatable sac, called a dula, is irresistible to female camels, especially when covered in a thick layer of stinking saliva and accompanied by the male spraying his urine everywhere. If it works its magic, he'll get a chance to mate, which oddly, camels do sitting down. The inflatable dula also serves as a warning to other males in the competition for access to females.
Is there any other animal that we can think of that has that?
The only thing that I can think of that's similar is a bladder-nosed seal, which has a membrane in the nasal cavity that it can also throw out of its nose like a balloon to make a big display. And it's also red. But nothing that I know of that has something like this in the mouth.
And here's the tongue. It's actually
nothing
not that,
very
it's not
special.
that big, is it?
Not compared to
Nothing very
this.
special, except that it can be poked out and also wrapped around food to prehend it. He's not going to do very much initial chewing. His main mastication is going to come when he regurgitates and rechews it.
The camel constantly throws up into its mouth to rechew food and break it down some more.
What? What you doing?
This is how the camel family gets a bad reputation.
I don't think you should be doing this. What?
They often grunt and bellow. If they're rechewing their lunch at the same time, things can get messy.
So first time swallowing it, it's about getting it down there with loads of saliva. How much do these guys produce?
Well, they produce, if they're fully hydrated, they'll produce 80 litres a day.
80 litres?
Yeah, that's 17.4 gallons.
That's a huge amount of fluid when water's scarce.
Yeah.
So it all ends up moving down, the esophagus down here, huge, great long esophagus, through the chest cavity and ends up in here. So can we go in there next, Jeff, into the abdomen and start having a look at the stomachs?
Yep, we should reflect that back leg.
Okay, so get the leg over. So you tell me what you want me to do.
Right, lift it up.
Okay.
The big mystery, especially for an animal that uses so much fluid, yet rarely drinks, is how it survives on so little water.
Life is deeply dependent on water. We came from water. Most of our evolutionary history has been in water. We only left the water relatively recently, and our bodies are almost all made of water. When space scientists look out at the heavens trying to find evidence of life elsewhere in the universe, the first thing they look for is water. So what happens when an animal leaves the water, and not only leaves the water, but enters a desert, a place where there is effectively no water? It's a big problem.
Have we got the stomach in there? It's
This
full
is
of gas.
part of stomach here that's full of gas, and I think we should degas it.
Yep, just let a bit of gas out.
Yep.
Smelling good.
Oh, that's pungent.
Ooh, that's smelling very nice indeed.
What am I cutting here? This is kidney?
Yeah,
that's spleen.
That's
That's
kidney.
spleen.
Joy and Jeff are now working hard, surrounded by thousands of flies, to try and get the whole of the digestive system out of the camel. That means removing the stomach and the intestines. At first sight, it all looks pretty much like a cow, but it's the stomach that I really want to look at, because I'm absolutely sure that holds the key to how this animal manages to survive in what is such a hot and harsh environment.
Okay, here it goes.
You got it?
Yeah.
Well done.
All right, had my workout for the day. Oh, that's humongous.
In the bottom of this.
All that rechewing, soaking in saliva, followed by ages fermenting in the stomach, turns tough desert plants to this, a nutritious soup.
I don't think I've seen anything like that.
So this is the content of the stomach,
Yeah.
with all that saliva. Look at all that water. That is such a precious commodity here in the middle of Australia.
In the desert, water keeps you alive, keeping your blood flowing. But when you sweat, your blood loses water. It becomes sludgy and can't flow. If you don't drink, you die. This is called explosive heat death. The camel has a unique solution to this problem, which Jeff is keen to point out.
Look
Wow,
at that,
that's
almost
weird.
like
Look at that.
pockets. Look at this. This is extraordinary.
They're called glandular sacs.
Glandular sacs. They are absolutely stunning.
They're
In-
pretty deep, too.
In there. You can get your whole finger down.
Yeah, it's kind of pretty.
That
Look at all this. Look at that.
But that gives a lot of surface area in there. Huge surface area.
Yeah, well, they've got the great capacity to reabsorb moisture and put it in the bloodstream to keep that vital blood circulation going. That's
Here,
it.
we just...
The pouches and folds of the digestive tract give it a massive surface area that helps make the camel super efficient at extracting water from its digestive juices.
Oh, this is the glandular stomach?
This goes straight into the blood to keep it flowing.
Here. It's so completely backwards, because in most animals, this is where more secretions are coming out, not going the other way. So camels are backwards here.
The camel's secret to being able to live for a length of time without taking in fresh water is because he conserves it and recycles it.
So it's just a recycling machine, which is...
Recycles it.
Wow, that's amazing.
That is why
Yeah, really
these
is.
animals have been able to take over Australia.
Mark wants to find out how this population explosion has affected farmers like Alan, who's somewhat of a desert survivor himself.
So your place here then is what, as far as the eye can see, is all part of the station, is it?
Yeah. As far as you can see, and then a good bit more.
Is it?
He takes Mark for a long drive through his farm. It's so vast that it takes hours to cross.
Now, Mark, did you hear about the Mongolian that was getting married?
No.
Well, there was this Mongolian young man.
The cows out here roam almost wild and only see people once or twice a year. You don't get more free range than this.
He said, there's no way that'll keep till Saturday. Well, I reckon this is a good place to have a run, Mark.
It is, listen.
There you go, see?
That's very generous of you. I like this place. It's beautiful, isn't it?
Well, it is to us folk, yeah. We think it's all right.
So how much better on the land here are camels compared to your cattle, for instance?
Oh, the camels are a lot better. Camels are always fat. They never have a drought, camels. But the only reason they're not farmed commercially is they're too slow to do anything. There's 4 or 5 years before they're ready to slaughter, you know, whereas a bovine is only maybe 18 months, you know.
But couldn't you just leave them wandering around till they've got their 5 years to develop and then...
Well, you could, but, you know, it's too long to wait.
If they weren't controlled and culled, in the long term, what do you think would happen?
Well, this country would turn like the Sahara Desert. There'd be no vegetation here. You know, because they would eat themselves out of house and home.
Tough place to live?
Yeah, I suppose it is. I don't... they tell us that it's the driest part of the driest state on the driest bloody continent on Earth, but I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what all the records are saying, but...
Seems like not a great place to go farming, then.
Yeah, well, I suppose desperate men do desperate things, eh?
If you ended up, you know, getting lost out here, how long would you survive as a human?
Well, depends how tough you were, I guess, but, yeah, in the middle of summer without any water, you'd be lucky to make 24 hours, I'd say. But if you're a bit out of condition, yeah, you'd be buggered, eh?
In deserts, humans must drink water constantly to survive. When it's really hot and we sweat, we lose water fast. Simon wants to put some camels through their paces to see who gets dehydrated first after a long run.
Going for a run in these kind of Australian temperatures is probably not the best of ideas. If you're going so, you need to drink an awful lot more so that you can keep your body working at its optimum and maintain your body temperature that bit lower. I think the camels definitely had me in that.
Right, Simon, let's see if you are dehydrated now.
Dr. Shaka Issa is going to test how dehydrated Simon is compared to the camel.
This is a surprisingly tricky maneuver, actually, because the penis of a camel points backwards, and this guy might not be in the mood. Hey, that's it. Oh, I wish you were a better shot, though, mate. This is not where you want to be standing either, at the rear end of a camel, whenever you've got flies and urine covering you. Good boy. The colour changes in these sticks will tell us how dehydrated I really got and how dehydrated the camel is. This fourth patch here is ideal. If that changes colour, that can tell us how dehydrated it got.
But look at the specific gravity, it is greener even than you.
After the long run, Simon's dehydrated. But the camel scored the lowest possible on the test. It was hardly dehydrated at all.
Hasn't drank for 3 days and
Yes.
still beating me.
Specific gravity, very green.
No wonder these
Pure
things can live in the
this one.
desert. That's amazing, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it is amazing.
So if camels don't sweat much, this means they must be getting hot. Really hot.
So Jeff, what's the story?
Well, they are able to allow their body temperature to range through, up and down through 6 degrees centigrade.
6 degrees?
Yeah.
That is huge.
And could we cope with that?
I don't think so. Human would be dead if you had a 6-degree change on a regular basis.
Now, that may take the temperature over the safe maximum for the brain, and there is a special cooling mechanism within the head to cope with that.
The camel's core can survive temperatures that would kill a human. But brain tissue is more sensitive. So how does the camel keep its brain cool?
You can see the rolls going around.
The secret lies in these structures called turbinates. They are tiny in humans, but absolutely enormous in camels.
Look at that, that's incredibly delicate. And you can see they're almost like onion ring layers that's in here. That's wafer-thin bone, just covered in membrane with loads of blood vessels in it. And these go right back to the base of where the brain box is.
The turbinates of the camel have a huge, moist surface area. As it breathes in, the moisture evaporates, cooling the blood vessels that cover the turbinates. This cool blood runs deep into the skull. Here, it meets a vessel full of hot blood on its way up towards the brain. This splits into a fine mesh of tubes called a rete. It passes tightly around the vessel, carrying the cool blood. The vessels are so entwined that the hot blood is chilled by the cool blood and can now supply the brain without cooking it.
With the thermal imaging camera, you can see every breath. Colder going in, hotter coming out. Colder going in, and hotter going out. This neat little nasal trick allows it to keep the blood around its brain nice and cold. This is vital for survival.
So the camel keeps its brain cool while its body takes the heat, saving vital water. But there's no escaping one call of nature, the need to pee. Joy's curious to see if there's something special about the camel's kidneys.
All animals need to use water to eliminate waste. So let's take a look at the kidneys and the bladder. These kidneys are not particularly large considering the size of the animal. They're pretty normal sized. But what really surprises me is how small this organ is, right here. That's the bladder. And in fact, it's smaller than a human bladder. If you were to look at a human bladder, particularly a full one would be about this big. And an empty one may be about this size. But considering how much bigger this camel is than a human, that's teeny, 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 tiny. I would guess, based on the size of this, the camels probably don't piss all that often, or if they do, they're not putting out that much. And there we go, that's the inside of a kidney. And it's got all of these little stripes going toward the center. This is where all the filtration is taking place here. And the waste products are actually going down these tubes here and collecting in this area. And that, in turn, is running down this pipe. And that pipe is going to take it right to the bladder.
This powerful filtration system lets the camel produce urine with hardly any water in it. Like every part of this animal's anatomy, it holds onto and recycles every drop it can. It has to. Camels have been known to go 6 months without a drink. But when a camel does find water, it needs to make the most of it. These camels in northeast Chad are drinking enough to last them the 60-mile trek to the next oasis. Simon is taking on the ultimate binge drinker.
Camels are drinking machines. I want to find out how humans can compare. So I'm going to have a bit of a drinking contest and see if I can keep up with this camel. This is Mohammed, and he's not had a drink for 3 days. Had enough? It's hard to believe that this is only water, but I can feel it's kind of like my system has just been topped up to overflowing. You feel just generally unwell. I can't believe it. This guy's just down 30 litres or so in 2 minutes. I've not even hit 2 litres. But as a human, you're advised never to drink more than 2.5 litres in one sitting, or else you risk serious medical difficulty. The camel's just fine. They've been known to drink over 100 litres in a single sitting.
So how do they do it? The secret lies in their blood. Most mammals, including humans, have red blood cells that are round and dented. This shape means that when the blood gets dehydrated, the cells clog up. On the other hand, if you add too much water into the bloodstream, the cells swell and burst. Either of these could kill you, but they're not fatal for the camel. The camel's red blood cells are smaller, flatter, and oval. This streamlined shape allows them to flow without getting clogged up when fluid levels in the bloodstream drop. And even when water floods into the bloodstream, their structure holds them together and they don't burst.
I guess the moral of the story is don't enter a drinking competition with a camel.
The insides of this camel mirror the extreme climate it inhabits. Flash floods followed by long, hard drought. Whatever it faces, the camel plugs on relentlessly, taking everything in its stride. When this car crashed into a camel in India, there's no doubt which came off worse. There's something magnificent about the defiant resilience of a camel.
Holy cow.
Here it is, a camel carrying a car up a hill.
It can carry loads that would break a horse's back. It can easily travel 30 miles a day and has been clocked at speeds of 35 miles per hour. This is something Simon's keen to try for himself.
Hey, good boy. There's a story of how a few years back there was a race across the outback between a camel and a horse. Now, the horse won by a few hours, but it died that night of exhaustion. The camel, though, made that same journey back home the very next day. A horse and a camel both have free gaits. Well, whenever a horse trots, this guy instead goes pacing, like this. Right legs, left legs, right legs, left legs, alternating all the time.
It's this pacing gait that allows camels to stretch their legs so far with each stride, efficiently covering lots of ground without risking their legs colliding.
This is kind of fun. Yeehaw! The camel also has another gait. Like a horse, it can do a full gallop. Though this is an endurance creature, if it wants to get up a bit of speed, it can. Woohoo! Go, Raj!
Are you ready? We're going to drag that away.
You got to cut it off first.
Oh, out of the flies. Okay, do you need a hand?
To investigate the camel's ability to travel such vast distances across sandy terrain, the team is going to look at how survival in the desert has shaped its leg.
Okay. That's a big leg. We're away from the flies. Wow.
Okay,
That's a very big leg. Do you want to get some tools?
The ancestor of the camel had hooves. The camel's soft toes are a recent adaptation for walking in the desert.
Looking at the toe.
Okay, 2 toes, 2 nails. Would these be considered hooves? Would this be a cloven hoof?
You call it a foot. No, it's not a cloven foot because it has a common pad together.
So this is the ankle here. This is the foot.
That corresponds to our ankle.
And these are these middle 2 toes then, just like that.
Yeah, that's it.
This is a hell of a sole of a foot, isn't it?
That's a keratinized pad, similar to the pads on a dog's foot. And this keratin is expandable. When the foot comes down, it will expand like this, which is handy in soft going because it means that there's more bearing surface.
Hidden inside the camel's foot are some extreme shock absorbers.
There's the pad.
Yeah.
Okay, see, they're almost like two eggs, these pads, aren't they? Egg shapes.
That's right.
They do. Look at that.
That's perfect.
Look at that.
And here's the other one.
They're really, really squishy.
I mean, they're almost like silicon implants.
Gel insoles.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And each one of these pads is directly underneath one of the toe bones.
One of the toes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The weight of the camel bears down on just 2 toes in each foot. Underneath each one is a cushion. This flattens out, absorbing the shock and balancing the animal on unsteady ground.
I just want to open this up a little bit better so we can see it. You do that.
The last adaptation the team is going to look at is how the legs have evolved for long-distance desert travel.
Okay, let's just rotate this up 90 degrees. Okay. Okay, so now we can see the Achilles tendon here, this huge, great tendon. It's pretty movable now, not much tension on it. If you start to flex that joint...
It's actually quite springy.
Okay, so just bring it back, Joy, to full flexion. That's really taut now, that Achilles tendon down here. So lots of energy stored in that. And let go. Wow, and it kicks backwards. It's incredibly...
It practically threw my hand off.
It's incredibly strong, and this kind of rubber band anatomy in the camel's leg is what helps it save energy when it's wandering around in its environment. It's extraordinary, amazingly powerful.
By storing energy in its leg tendons, the camel can save almost half the work that the muscles would have to do with each stride. By saving energy, it stays cooler, holding back its stores for the next round in its constant battle with the desert. The leg, like every part of this beast's anatomy, is a response to living in an empty, boiling, deadly land.
Camel's success story here in Australia is certainly controversial, but I can't help but admire the fact that these guys are thriving so well left to their own devices. After all, it's not their fault that evolution's prepared them so perfectly for life in such a harsh and hostile environment.
The desert environment has carved the DNA into exactly the right shape to build camel bodies which survive in this most difficult of environments. Kipling's Just So story, How the Camel Got Its Hump, makes the camel out to be lazy. Camel is not lazy. The camel is frugal, it's economical, it's tough. The camel is a triumph of Darwinian evolution.
Back in New York, Joy's approach to human anatomy is to compare us with other animals. She knows that, just as in camels, fat stores have played a crucial role in our evolution.
Camels, like all animals, need to store fat for when food is scarce. And lots of animals store fat all over the body, but camels store it primarily in their hump. But why do animals have fat? There's actually 3 main reasons. The first one, of course, is to have an energy source. The second one is to regulate their heat. Some animals actually burn fat, and other animals might actually use it like a down coat to give them insulation all around their body. Whales, for example, have fat even in their skin layer to trap in heat so that they can survive the cold, harsh conditions of living in the ocean. And of course, animals that live in polar regions are going to have fat stores that are going to help trap some of that heat. And the third reason might be because it's placed over the outside of the body, is it can form a layer of protection, kind of like armor over the body. And if we take a look at the skeleton, we can see where that fat is usually stored in people. This area is mostly where the fat is stored. And it's interesting that this is an area that covers your vital organs. And in fact, it's the opposite of a camel. The camel has it on its back. We have our hump in front.
Like other animals, we build up our fat stores from the food we eat, providing our bodies with essential energy. But the problems begin when we eat too much.
So what we have here is actually a piece of a human cadaver showing you how thick a fat layer can be. This came from a human that was very obese. This layer right out here is the skin, and you can see just how thick this fat layer is. Now this is yellow fat, the kind of fat that we would normally use to burn to create energy. But in fact, this person is putting a lot of resources into the fat layer to maintain it. It puts a strain on the cardiovascular system because this all has to be supplied with blood. It puts a strain on the muscular system because you have to use muscles to maintain posture. And it puts a strain on your joints and your bones because you're now carrying around a lot of extra weight. To many of us who are trying to diet, it's very distressing to find out how much energy it takes to actually burn off the fat that we put on. So if you're just sitting around after eating a pizza, it's going to take hours to burn that off. But if you're walking, like we're doing, you can do that about 3 times as fast. And if you're biking, you can get up to 4 times the amount. But if you really bike fast, you can burn up to 5 times the amount. And when you're jogging, you can burn it off about 7 times as fast. If you're skipping rope, you can burn 10 times as much.
Unfortunately, in our modern societies, many people fail to strike the balance between exercise and food intake.
Obesity is one of the biggest problems facing Americans today. Our bodies were really not adapted to carry that much fat all the time. Really, what our bodies were adapted to was to live in an environment where we had feast and famine. So we would gather all the food and eat the food when it was available, and then store the excess so that when food was not available, it was there. But that evolutionary advantage has actually become a hazard for us now.
It seems our ancestors' appetite for fat may be finally catching up with us.
You got enough for me, right?
You got it now, Joy. Thank you.
For more information on Inside Nature's Giants, visit pbs.org. This episode of Inside Nature's Giants is available on DVD. To order, visit shoppbs.org or call us at 1-800-PLAY-PBS.